Title: HOA Karen called 911 over cookies. She was fined for misusing emergency lines. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the cul-de-sac speakers of my memory. Ma'am, cookies are not an emergency. That call ended Diane Voss's reign forever. My name is Marin Castillo, and 18 months ago I was just a woman who baked too many snickerdoodles for the block party. I live in Willowbrook Estates, Ohio, a subdivision of beige houses, trimmed hedges, and one woman who believed she owned all of it. Diane Voss ran our homeowners association like a queen running a kingdom no one elected her to rule. She'd lived in Willowbrook for 11 years and served as HOA president for 9 of them, unopposed, because nobody wanted the headache. I moved in 3 years ago with my husband Ray and our daughter Sophia, chasing a good school district and a quiet street. Quiet, it turned out, meant something very different to Diane than it did to the rest of us. The first time I met her, she was measuring my lawn's grass height with an actual ruler, muttering about community standards. "Half an inch over," she said, not looking up. "I'll let it slide since you're new." I laughed, thinking she was joking. She was not joking. Diane Voss never joked about grass. Our neighbor Brooks Whitfield, a retired Army mechanic who'd lived there 20 years, warned me the first week, "Don't cross her. She keeps files." I didn't understand what that meant yet. I would understand very well, very soon. The HOA newsletter arrived monthly, always with a section titled Violations Corner, listing house numbers like a public shaming board. Diane loved that section. She wrote it herself, in a font too cheerful for its cruelty. For a while, our family stayed under her radar. We mowed on time, painted within the approved palette, obeyed the mailbox regulations. Then Sophia turned 7 and we hosted a small backyard party with balloons visible over our 6-foot fence. Diane knocked the next morning, clipboard in hand, informing us balloons constitute unauthorized decorative excess under Section 4, Article 12. I stared at her. They're birthday balloons. For a 7-year-old. Rules don't have exceptions for children, Mrs. Castillo. That's how neighborhoods fall apart. That was the moment I started paying real attention to Diane Voss. I began, almost as a hobby, keeping a small notebook. Just dates. Just what she said. Nothing dramatic yet. Brooks called it building a file on the file keeper. He wasn't wrong, and he wasn't the only one doing it. Over the next few months, the fines started rolling in, $20 here, $50 there, always technically defensible, always exhausting. A wreath on the door in March, off-season, $15. A trash can left out 90 minutes past the schedule, $25. My husband Ray, an engineer who liked things logical, kept saying, "There's no pattern here except that she never stops." 026. But there was a pattern. Diane's fines always hit certain houses harder, the Ahmeds, the Ortegas, Brooks and us. The Larsons, whose son played golf with Diane's husband, never got a single violation notice in 9 years. I noticed. I wrote it down. That notebook was becoming something more than a hobby. Then came the incident with Mrs. Ortega's wheelchair ramp, the first real crack in the community's patience. Diane cited the ramp for violating uniform exterior aesthetic guidelines, despite federal disability housing law protecting it completely. Mrs. Ortega, 81 years old, received a $200 fine and a threatening letter about potential lien action on her home. That was the twist that changed everything for me. I realized Diane wasn't just petty. She was dangerous. I drove to Mrs. Ortega's that evening with a casserole and my notebook, and she told me stories that made my blood run cold. "She's been doing this since her husband died," Mrs. Ortega whispered. "Something changed in her that year." That detail stuck with me, a widow's grief curdling into control. I didn't yet know how deep that history ran. I started researching Ohio HOA law that same week, staying up past midnight while Ray slept and Sophia dreamed. What I learned stunned me. HOAs have real power, but they also have real, hard legal limits. Diane was steamrolling. The Fair Housing Act. State disability protections. Even our own HOA's bylaws, which Diane selectively enforced like scripture. I printed everything. I organized it in color-coded folders. Ray called it Marin's evidence wall, half joking, half worried. "You're not a lawyer," he reminded me one night. "No," I said, "but I know a few. And I know how to read." My old college roommate, Priya Nair, had become a real estate attorney specializing in HOA disputes. I called her that same week. "Document everything," Priya said. "Dates, witnesses, photos, certified mail. Karens like this always overreach eventually. You just need patience." Patience. I had plenty of that. What I didn't yet have was proof of something big enough to end her. For months, I simply watched, recorded and waited, while Diane's fines against our family and our neighbors kept climbing. Brooks started calling our informal alliance, the Resistance, half mocking, half serious, over beers on his porch every Friday. The Ahmeds joined quietly. The Ortegas joined loudly. Even the Larsons' gardener, sick of Diane's demands, started passing us information. We learned Diane approved contractor bids from companies owned by her cousin, always the highest bidder, always somehow selected. That was suspicious, but suspicion wasn't proof, and Diane was careful, terrifyingly, meticulously careful with paper trails. Then, in the 5th month, the real conflict finally ignited over something almost absurdly small, my daughter's lemonade stand. Sophia set up a little table on our own driveway, selling lemonade for 50 cents a cup to save for a bike. Diane arrived within 20 minutes, informing us unauthorized commercial activity violated Section 7 and carried a $100 fine. "She's 7, I said, my voice shaking with a fury I hadn't let myself feel until now. "Rules are rules, Mrs. Castillo," Diane said, writing the citation while my daughter watched, confused and near tears. That night, I didn't write in my notebook. I opened a new document titled simply, "The Plan." Ray found me at 1 a.m., surrounded by printed HOA bylaws, county code and screenshots of Diane's old Facebook posts. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Building a case," I said. "Not a complaint. A case." Priya agreed to help formally now, off the clock at first, intrigued by the lemonade stand story going viral online. Yes, viral. Brooks had filmed the whole citation on his phone and it had already reached 40,000 views by morning. Local news picked it up within 2 days. HOA finds 7-year-old's lemonade stand. Diane's face, unflattering, everywhere. Diane Voss had just made her first real mistake and she had no idea how many more were coming. The lemonade stand story brought something we hadn't had before, outside eyes watching Willowbrook Estates. Reporters called the HOA management office. Diane, cornered, gave a statement calling the backlash a media-driven overreaction to standard governance. That phrase, standard governance, became a meme in our neighborhood group chat within hours. But cornered animals get more dangerous, not less, and Diane's next move proved it immediately. She retaliated by digging through old records and citing my family for a fence height discrepancy from 2 years prior. The fence, installed by the previous owner, was 4 inches taller than current code, grandfathered in by law. I knew this. Priya knew this. Diane, it turned out, knew it too, and cited us anyway, betting we wouldn't fight. That was twist number 2, Diane wasn't just enforcing rules. She was manufacturing violations to punish dissent. I brought the grandfather clause documentation to the next HOA meeting, printed, notarized and utterly airtight. Diane's face flickered, just for a second, before she recovered and dismissed it as a filing oversight, easily corrected. No apology. No acknowledgement of the harassment pattern. Just quiet retreat to fight another day, another angle. Brooks leaned over and whispered, "She's testing how far she can push before someone actually sues her." He was right. And soon, someone would give her the perfect chance to find out. The Ahmeds, immigrants who'd built a small halal grocery business, decided to host a modest Eid gathering in their backyard. Diane arrived with a noise complaint form already filled out, time-stamped before the party had even technically started. "Someone must have called ahead," Mr. Ahmed said later, bewildered. We all understood exactly what someone meant. The fine was $150 for excessive gathering noise after 9 p.m., though neighbors confirmed the party ended at 8:45. Diane had backdated a complaint. That wasn't overzealous rule following anymore. That was fabrication, plain and simple. I photographed the timestamp discrepancy from the HOA portal before Diane could quietly edit the record, as she'd done before. Priya's eyes lit up when I showed her. "This," she said, "is the beginning of a paper trail she can't fix." We started calling our group chat Evidence Locker instead of The Resistance. It felt more accurate, more serious now. Meanwhile, Diane escalated her public rhetoric, posting long Facebook essays about outside agitators destroying community values. She specifically named no one, but everyone knew exactly who she meant: me, Brooks, the Ahmeds, the Ortegas. Then came a twist that shook the whole neighborhood. Diane proposed a new bylaw requiring board approval for backyard gatherings over 10 people. It was clearly aimed at silencing dissenters, but it needed a homeowner vote to pass, and Diane assumed compliance. She miscalculated badly. The proposal galvanized homeowners who'd stayed quiet for years, afraid of becoming her next target. At the vote meeting, 43 homeowners showed up, the largest turnout Willowbrook Estates had seen in a decade. Diane, visibly rattled by the crowd, tried delaying the vote, citing quorum irregularities that didn't actually exist under our bylaws. Brooks stood up and read the actual quorum rule aloud, word for word, from the HOA's own governing document. The room went silent, then erupted into applause. Diane's authority, for the first time, visibly cracked in public. The bylaw failed, 78% voting no. It was a small defeat for her, but a massive symbolic one. That night, I updated the evidence locker with the backdated EAD complaint, the fabricated fence citation, and Diane's Facebook rants. Priya reviewed everything and said the words I'd been waiting months to hear: "This is enough to file a formal complaint." Not a lawsuit yet, a formal grievance to the county's HOA Oversight Board and a demand letter to Diane's management company. We drafted it carefully, citing statutes, attaching evidence, naming specific instances of selective enforcement and fabricated violations. Diane received the letter on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, her Facebook posts had gone eerily, suspiciously silent. Brooks said silence from Diane was scarier than her yelling. "Quiet Karens," he said, "are plotting Karens." He was right again. Diane wasn't backing down. She was regrouping, and her next move would be far more personal. Within a week, Diane filed a formal complaint against me, alleging I was harassing board members and inciting neighborhood unrest. The irony was staggering. The woman fining 7-year-olds now claimed victimhood in front of the same oversight board. Priya wasn't worried. "This is desperation," she said. "She's trying to muddy the record before it gets worse for her." But desperation made Diane reckless, and reckless Karens, I would learn, make catastrophic mistakes. She started showing up uninvited at my house, twice in 1 week, just checking on compliance, she claimed. The second time, Sophia was home alone for 10 minutes while I ran to get the mail, and Diane knocked repeatedly, unannounced. Sophia, frightened by the aggressive knocking, didn't answer and later told me Diane had peered through our front window. That was the line. "Nobody frightens my daughter and gets away with it, board president or not." I installed a doorbell camera that weekend, the single best decision of this entire nightmare. 3 days later, the camera caught something extraordinary: Diane, alone, moving our garbage bins slightly out of position. Then, an hour later, she photographed the misplaced bins herself and issued us a citation for bin placement. I had video proof she'd staged the violation with her own hands, time-stamped, undeniable, damning. Priya nearly laughed reviewing the footage. She just handed us the case. She tampered with evidence to create a false citation. We didn't confront Diane immediately. Priya insisted on patience, let her keep digging. Karens who think they're winning overreach further. And overreach she did, in a way none of us saw coming, involving something far more serious than fines. Diane began pressuring the HOA's management company to place a lien on Mrs. Ortega's home over unpaid, accumulated fines. Mrs. Ortega, on a fixed income, had genuinely fallen behind, but many fines were the fabricated ramp violations from before. A lien meant potential foreclosure. Diane was threatening an elderly disabled widow's home over illegally issued citations. That was the moment this stopped being a neighborhood squabble and became, unmistakably, a fight worth everything. I called Priya at 11 p.m., "We need to move now. This isn't about fines anymore. This is her home." Priya agreed instantly. "I'm filing an emergency injunction request tomorrow morning. And Marin, we're going to the press too." The next escalation would be public, painful, and impossible for Diane Voss to control any longer. Priya filed the injunction Thursday morning, citing fabricated violations and discriminatory enforcement against a disabled homeowner. The county judge granted a temporary hold on the lien within 48 hours, Diane's first real legal defeat. Furious, Diane called an emergency board meeting, insisting the injunction was activist judges interfering with legitimate governance. Only 3 of 5 board members showed up. 2 had quietly resigned the week before, unwilling to be associated with her anymore. That was twist number 3, Diane's own board was abandoning ship, sensing exactly where this was headed. One resigning member, Mr. Patel, privately told me Diane had pressured him for years to approve contracts benefiting her cousin's company. He handed me copies of emails proving it, years of inflated landscaping invoices, kickbacks disguised as management fees. Financial fraud. Not just petty tyranny, but actual embezzlement from HOA dues paid by every family in Willowbrook. Priya's eyes went wide reading the emails. This isn't just a housing complaint anymore, Marin. This is potentially criminal. We brought the emails to the county prosecutor's office, alongside the fabricated citations and the bin tampering footage. A financial crimes investigator opened a preliminary inquiry into the HOA's landscaping contracts within the week. Diane, unaware how much we already had, doubled down publicly, calling us a small group of troublemakers in the local paper. The reporter, sensing a bigger story, started digging independently and found something none of us had discovered yet. Diane Voss's husband hadn't died of natural causes as the neighborhood assumed, he'd taken his own life after his own business collapsed. The collapse, records showed, followed a fraud investigation eerily similar to what Diane was now facing. That was the twist that reframed everything. Diane's tyranny wasn't random cruelty. It was fear, calcified into control. I felt something unexpected, a flicker of pity, quickly extinguished by remembering Mrs. Ortega's terror over losing her home. Sympathy for someone's pain didn't erase the harm she'd caused. Brooks said it best. Wounded people still choose how they act. 139. We proceeded. Priya said grief explained Diane, but it didn't excuse fabricating evidence or threatening a widow's house. The story broke citywide, HOA president facing fraud investigation amid harassment allegations. Diane's name trended locally for days. Neighbors who'd stayed silent for years suddenly came forward with their own stories, their own fines, their own fears. A woman 2 streets over revealed Diane had once fined her for a rainbow flag violating uniform aesthetic standards. Another resident described being fined for a wheelchair ramp nearly identical to Mrs. Ortega's, quietly paid out of fear. The evidence locker group chat exploded with new testimonies, dates, screenshots, Diane's decade of quiet cruelty finally surfacing. Priya organized it all into a single, devastating master timeline for the upcoming county oversight hearing. Diane, sensing the walls closing in, tried one last desperate maneuver, forcing an emergency vote to dissolve the current board entirely. If the board dissolved, ongoing investigations into contracts and fines might stall in bureaucratic limbo for months. She scheduled the vote quickly, hoping low turnout and confusion would let her reconstruct a friendlier board alone. But Brooks, tracking every HOA notice obsessively now, caught the scheduling conflict immediately and alerted everyone. The vote date fell on a Jewish holiday, effectively disenfranchising several observant families who'd been vocal against Diane. That wasn't oversight. Priya confirmed Diane had scheduled it deliberately, checking calendars herself according to a leaked internal email. We filed an immediate complaint with the county and the meeting was postponed pending review of the scheduling. Diane's tactical brilliance, once her greatest weapon, was now collapsing under the weight of too many exposed maneuvers. Meanwhile, the fraud investigation into landscaping contracts formally expanded, subpoenaing 5 years of HOA financial records. Diane's cousin's landscaping company had billed Willowbrook Estates nearly triple market rate for basic seasonal work. Over 5 years, the inflated invoices totaled almost $90,000 in overpaid HOA dues, our money, quietly siphoned. When residents learned the number, outrage replaced confusion entirely. This wasn't strict governance. This was theft. Diane, cornered financially and legally, hired an aggressive attorney and threatened to countersue several residents for defamation. Priya wasn't rattled. Truth is a defense, she said. And we have documentation for every single claim we've made. The countersuit threat, meant to intimidate, instead solidified the community's resolve. Nobody backed down, nobody apologized. A twist arrived when Diane's own attorney quietly resigned from the case, citing irreconcilable differences regarding case strategy. Rumors suggested he'd seen the bin tampering footage and the backdated Eid complaint and refused to defend fabricated evidence. Diane, now representing herself in preliminary filings, made procedural mistakes that further damaged her position daily. The county oversight hearing date was finally set, 3 months after that fateful lemonade stand citation. In the weeks before, Diane tried a strange final tactic, sudden, unexplained kindness, offering to waive all outstanding fines community-wide. Some residents wondered if she'd genuinely changed. I didn't buy it. Neither did Priya. That's a plea deal, not remorse, she said. We learned why days later. Waiving fines would also quietly erase the paper trail proving fabricated citations existed. That was twist number 4, her sudden generosity was actually evidence destruction, dressed up as neighborly goodwill. Priya moved fast, filing an emergency request to preserve all HOA financial and violation records before anything could vanish. The judge granted it within a day, freezing every fine record, every citation, every dollar of HOA funds under review. Diane's final maneuver had failed before it even began, and now the hearing loomed with nowhere left to hide. The night before the hearing, Brooks hosted everyone on his porch, evidence locker members trading nervous jokes and old stories. Whatever happens, Mrs. Ortega said, gripping my hand, you gave the street its voice back. That's not nothing. I didn't sleep much that night, running through Priya's questions, rehearsing testimony, thinking about that lemonade stand citation. Sophia, now 8, asked if Diane would go to jail. I don't know, baby, I told her honestly. But she'll answer for it. Ray held my hand at breakfast. You turned a 50-cent lemonade stand into a county fraud investigation, he said, half laughing. She did that, I corrected him. I just kept the receipts. We arrived at the county building at 8 a.m., the parking lot already full of Willowbrook residents, more than I expected. Reporters lined the entrance, cameras ready, having tracked this story for weeks through local news and social media. Diane arrived 20 minutes late, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky, flanked by a new, visibly unenthusiastic attorney. The hearing began with the financial fraud allegations, county investigator Denise Chu presenting 5 years of inflated invoices. Diane's cousin's company had billed for seasonal aeration services on months when the ground was frozen solid, invoices showed. Denise Chu calmly stated the estimated total overbilling now exceeded $92,000 in improperly approved contracts. Diane's new attorney requested a recess. The judge denied it. The evidence, he said, was already extraordinarily clear. Next came the fabricated violations testimony, Priya walking the panel through backdated complaints and impossible timestamps. Mr. Ahmed testified about the Eid party citation, his voice steady despite years of quiet humiliation finally surfacing publicly. Mrs. Ortega testified about the ramp fines and lien threat, her hands trembling but her words devastatingly clear. Then came the bin tampering footage, played on a large screen for the entire hearing room to witness. Diane, on camera, clearly moving the bins herself before photographing and citing the violation she'd staged. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Diane's face, visible on a second monitor, went pale, then flushed with fury. Her attorney whispered something urgently. Diane shook her head, refusing whatever advice she was being given. "May I speak?" she asked the judge suddenly, against her attorney's clear objection. The judge allowed it. This was the moment. This was the twist we hadn't planned for, Diane about to speak, unscripted, in front of everyone. "I have given 11 years to this community," Diane began, voice shaking with something between rage and grief. Every rule, every fine, was meant to protect property values, protect standards, protect what we built here together. Nobody appreciates the sacrifice of governance until it's gone. You'll miss me when chaos returns to these streets. The room stayed silent. Then Brooks, unable to help himself, muttered just loud enough, "We'll take our chances." A ripple of laughter broke the tension and Diane's face crumpled with a fury she couldn't disguise anymore. The judge, unmoved by her speech, asked her directly to address the bin tampering footage shown minutes earlier. Diane hesitated, then said the words that ended her completely, "I was testing the community's compliance awareness." Nobody believed it. Not the judge, not the gallery, not even, visibly, her own remaining attorney. The panel moved to close deliberations, but Diane, unraveling, interrupted again, demanding to address the real culprit here. "Marin Castillo has been stalking me for months," she said, gesturing wildly. "Harassing me. Recording me illegally." Priya calmly produced documentation proving all footage came from our own private property's legally installed doorbell camera. That claim, her last real weapon, dissolved instantly under simple, boring, undeniable legal fact. Then came the twist none of us expected, delivered by Diane's own resigning attorney in a follow-up statement. He revealed Diane had asked him, weeks earlier, to help quietly relocate HOA reserve funds before the audit concluded. He'd refused and kept records of the request, which he now submitted under subpoena to the investigating panel. Attempted concealment of funds during an active investigation. Diane hadn't just been fraudulent, she'd tried covering it up in real time. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Diane stood abruptly, knocking over her water glass, and the judge called for order. "This hearing," the judge said firmly, "will now refer all financial matters directly to the district attorney's office." Criminal referral. Not just an HOA dispute anymore, but potential embezzlement and evidence tampering charges against Diane Voss. Diane's face, for the first time in 11 years, showed something none of us had ever seen: genuine fear. She was escorted out separately from the gallery, her new attorney already on the phone before they'd cleared the doorway. Brooks leaned over to me, grinning despite himself. "A cookie 911 call started this. Can you believe that?" I laughed for the first time in weeks, a real laugh, releasing months of tension in one exhausted exhale. The Oversight Board issued an emergency ruling that afternoon, immediately suspending Diane Voss from all HOA authority pending trial. All frozen fines against residents, real or fabricated, were voided entirely, and the lien threat against Mrs. Ortega was permanently dismissed. The reserve fund freeze remained active, protecting whatever money hadn't yet been quietly siphoned away. That evening, Brooks hosted an impromptu porch celebration and half the neighborhood showed up with food and relief. Mrs. Ortega hugged me so tightly I nearly dropped my plate. "My home is safe," she whispered. "Because of you." "Because of all of us," I corrected gently. "I just kept the notebook." Sophia, now understanding more than a 7-year-old should have to, asked if the lemonade stand made all this happen. "In a way, baby," I told her. "Sometimes the smallest unfairness is the first thread you pull." Ray raised a glass. "To Karens who mess with the wrong lemonade stand," he said, and everyone laughed, toasting loudly. 3 weeks later, the district attorney formally charged Diane with embezzlement, evidence tampering, and attempted misappropriation of association funds. Her bail hearing made local news again, cameras capturing her leaving the courthouse without sunglasses this time, exposed and diminished. The new interim HOA board, led by Mr. Patel and myself, immediately restructured fine procedures with independent review requirements. We instituted a rule Diane never allowed: any resident could appeal a citation to a rotating panel, not one single authority. Mrs. Ortega's ramp received a formal community commendation instead of a fine, a small but meaningful reversal of years of cruelty. Diane's trial, 6 months later, ended in a plea deal, restitution of the stolen funds and 18 months probation. No jail time, which frustrated some residents, but a permanent ban from ever serving on any HOA board again. She sold her house within 2 months, unable to face the neighbors she'd controlled for over a decade. I saw her once more, loading a moving truck alone, and for a moment our eyes met across the quiet street. She didn't apologize. I didn't expect her to. Some people never learn to say the words that matter. I simply nodded and she looked away first, the way she never had in 11 years of ruling Willowbrook. Brooks says the stories become neighborhood legend now, retold at every block party, always ending with the lemonade stand. Sophia, older now, still sells lemonade every summer and neighbors always pay double, laughing about the Karen tax. The real cost of Diane's decade of cruelty wasn't just fines or fear, it was years of silence we can't fully reclaim. But Willowbrook Estates learned something rare, that patience, evidence, and one stubborn woman's notebook can outlast any tyrant.